You're watching PowerNation.
Today on Detroit Muscle, we're kicking off a brand new build.
So, if you're into big bone bow ties and burnouts, you're gonna wanna stay tuned.
Well guys, we're all set to kick off a brand new project. But what we got up our sleeve ain't exactly a mainstream build.
The generation of car that we have our eye on can usually grab plenty of attention, but I bet it's in a completely different mindset than what you're thinking when it comes to fixing up a car.
Most of the time, people tend to gravitate towards the more popular cars.
Is that rough?
Seen better days.
What we're planning to build is a bow tie, but it's not your normal muscle car. What about this one? Enough said.
The 1971 to 76 big body GMs have a following all their own. Oftentimes when a person builds one, they're welding the door shut to crash and smash it up on a Friday night. If you guys have ever been to a demolition derby, you know size and durability matters. And the draw of big bow ties is that they have enough horsepower and backbone to pack one mean punch, making them ideal derby rigs.
I did that for several years and it was a whole lot of fun, but that's all in the past now. And there's something about being able to build and create something that you get to keep instead of recycling.
Is this even legal? When it comes to the 71 through 76 GMB bodies, the overall shape and silhouette are pretty much the same. But the most popular and most sought after, gotta be the drop tops.
Finding one of these that's a good candidate for a fixer-upper can be extremely difficult because convertibles are normally rusty, and when they aren't, they're expensive. And that's for a good reason. Quality tin work can be a bit pricey. If only a person could find a rust-free body sitting in a barn somewhere in the sticks.
Now between the years, there are some variances. Mainly the differences are the impact strips of chrome on each end. The 74 to 76 cars have bigger bumpers. That's probably one of the main reasons why the crash and bash guys love them so much. And in 74, GM introduced the 5-mile-an-hour bumpers on the front and rear. These can absorb a small impact and then go back into place. This design made it safer, but it is a bit bulky. The early model big bodies like the 71s and 72s have much smaller and tighter bumpers. And when I'm talking smaller, I mean multiple inches, in comparison to their later model counterparts. Often this design is considered cleaner because it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. The taillights, some of the trim, and the grille are also a bit more tasteful compared to the later models.
You could think of one of these as a big brother version of a Monte Carlo or Chevelle. It has some of the same characteristics and shapes coming at you, just in a bigger scale. Just look at the lines of the fender, the bump in the hood, and even the shape of the front bumper. If you can see that resemblance, that should tell you that these have potential.
When you have a lot of project cars to work on, maximizing your storage space is key, especially when you're sharing that space with a few friends. So when parking spaces are hard to come by, we like to use the Backyard Buddy. Advantage Lift's Backyard Buddy is crafted from high-quality steel right here in the USA. It's freestanding and mobile to help you make the most of your space. The underside construction has been enhanced to allow easier adjustment along with greater durability. Its double lock system, paired with single point manual release, is designed to keep you and your ride safe and secure. With a dedication to quality, safety, and strength, Advantage Lift's Backyard Buddy is an affordable storage solution for any gearhead. Batten down the hatches because this old boat is going full steam ahead.
So let us introduce our latest project.
It's a 1971 Chevrolet Caprice that we've christened as Fat Stack.
A while back, we had the opportunity to help one of you guys out with a driveway rescue. The owner of this jewel had been tinkering on it in his spare time. Just having it back to a reliable condition was his main goal.
Then one day, we got the call. He was ready to pass it on and asked if we were interested. How could we say no?
With being inspired by some of those trends that we just showed you, well, we've devised ourselves a plan for this big project. And no, we're not about to weld the doors closed and put headers through the hood. We're gonna apply that sweet hot rod recipe, which usually means big power, cool paint, and killer stands.
To achieve our goal is gonna take a whole lot of work, plus a truckload of parts. Because this big bone bow tie is by no means a performer in its current state.
So what's your words of encouragement here for this car?
Go fast, don't die, and look good doing it.
Even if we sped up the footage, this thing would be slow. However, it did bow up when we stood on the gas pedal. The body had good weight transfer, but I bet that was from just being old. Woo! Burning some rubber is fun, but somewhat embarrassing if you only leave one mark. Shoot, that thing looks like one of those Duke Boys burnouts.
Now we knew it wasn't gonna be fast. It weighs over 2 tons and it doesn't make a whole lot of power. And we had a lot of trouble trying to find where this thing shines in its stock form.
Now, according to my calculations, that car is going to be a crowd pleaser because of it's a 5,000-pound vehicle and it makes about 200 impressive horsepower and it has a front tire that's about this wide. So that thing is going to be all over the place.
The size, power, and suspension ain't much to write home about. There's a reason people call these things a boat, and it has nothing to do with their buoyancy.
You know, if it looks this impressive out here, I bet it feels like something for sure in the driver's seat. That dude's got, I bet that thing's got that much body roll in it.
The motion of the ocean in this situation will put a smile on your face, but there's a good chance you'll be tuckered out from all the cranking on the wheel. This whole thing at one point even looked like it might lift the driver front wheel off the ground.
I think that cone got nervous. It fell over like them old pygmy goats. That was impressive. That was very impressive.
Got a hold of it.
Oh, the wind got a hold of it, he said. That must have been he come around it so fast. I don't know, that thing's probably about as aerodynamic as a bulldozer. So if you want to see what 850 horsepower, trick suspension, and mile deep paint looks like on one of these, you might want to stick around.
You guys may have noticed that our old Caprice has a few cool characteristics about it, and one of the most prominent has got to be the reverse cowl deck lid that's complemented with a number of louver-style air vents. Not only did this add a few aesthetic upgrades to this body style, the engineers at GM also wanted to add some function to the personality, and the story behind this forced air ventilation design is quite interesting. Back in the 60s, safety concerns were circulating around carbon monoxide poisoning. GM set out to fix this problem with a feature they coined astroventilation. The idea was to build a setup that would push fresh air through the car even if the windows were rolled up and the AC was off. The air flowed through the cowl at the base of the windshield and into the interior by vents in the dash as it was moving down the road. In 1971, GM decided to take this design a step further by positively moving air through the car's cabin, whether it was in motion or not. Drawing air in through the cowl through the HVAC system, it was then pushed out to the vents on top of the trunk lid. However, that plan severely backfired and a national recall was summoned after complaints of multiple drivers falling asleep at the wheel due to exhaust fumes leaking into the cab of the vehicle. GM's solution? A simple piece of styrofoam to be stuck into the vents of the deck lid in order to seal out the toxic vapors. And this is one of those things where just because an idea looks good on paper doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate well out here in the real world.
Up next, our Caprice has an out-of-body experience. We've all heard that old saying, sometimes things have to get worse before they can get better. And that's the situation that we're in. Now we're gonna disconnect a few things here under the hood and then go up with the car and disconnect a few more. What we're gonna do is separate the body from the chassis, leaving the engine on the frame. Now it's time for us to get busy.
Metal piece off. When you go to disconnect the chassis from the body, there's a lot of things you need to remove. You got the radiator, hard lines, hoses, and some wiring that can get hung up during separation. Not to mention those nasty core support bolts. Then you got the brake lines and everything connected to the ignition coil.
We could go up, take starter loose from the bottom. I like big bodies, and I cannot lie. You know, they should make a song about that. She's a beaut. Well, the way that we're separating our body and chassis, we're going to have to remove the front and rear bumper. The reason for that is they more or less hook over it. Trying to separate it without them off, well, you're going to bend something up, and we definitely don't want to damage that grille. Alrighty, the bumper's loose. We've made some pretty good progress. We've got the transmission disconnected with the linkage and the speedo cable. We also got the emergency brake cable disconnected. What we need to do now is unhook the fuel tank lines and zip out the body bolts. If everything goes on without a hitch, we'll be ready to pull off that body. Removing body bolts may sound like a simple task, but sometimes it can be quite complicated. Now you can use an impact or a standard ratchet, but I'm going to give you a little tip. If you put the impact on there and they come right out, well, keep going. If you start hammering on that thing, hold off a second. Grab yourself just a regular old ratchet, put it on there, and keep constant pressure on it as you're cranking that thing out. The reason for that is inside of the body, there's a captured nut. And whenever you use an impact and it's hammering on it, well, you can break that thing loose, and to get it apart, you're going to have to cut on the body or torch off this bolt. Oh, that's a good sign. Ooh-wee. That one don't like it.
When it comes to these big body vehicles, Tommy is definitely the subject matter expert. At this point, he's taken apart so many heavy Chevys, it's become second nature.
Success! It's one of them instances you start thinking the powers that be if that thing come out.
As you can see, there's clearly a method to the madness.
Only thing between there is air. Guess you could say right now, it's time for the work to begin.
Coming up, we waltz through a piano wire duet in part preservation. You know guys, when you're starting a new project, it's real easy to get caught up in the moment and just start ripping this stuff apart. I think we've all been there. Get tools, trim pieces, hardware, body panels all strewn about like a tornado just ripped through your shop. In all reality though, this truly is the time to slow down and take care of the parts and pieces that you're pulling off. Come on, baby. And I'm not just talking about the traditional tag and bag that'll keep everything organized and save you a significant headache down the road. You also need to consider that replacing broken or missing parts lost during disassembly can hurt both your sanity and your wallet. For example, the taillight housing on our 71 Caprice. This particular setup has a somewhat sturdy, hardened plastic shell, as opposed to its later model counterparts such as a 75 or 76 that were constructed from a flimsier fiberglass material. Although one is technically stronger and more durable, the approach is still the same. You never want to risk any unnecessary damage to your restoration components during disassembly because, as you guys know, this stuff is becoming harder and harder to come by.
The subject of working with glass normally scares people. It's easy to say that the main concern is breaking what you're trying to remove. Sacrificing your glass normally isn't the goal. But if you slow down, pay attention, it's really not that intimidating and it's pretty basic. With our big body, we need to remove ours for a couple of reasons. One is it leaks around the seal and we're planning to replace that vinyl top. To get this glass out, it's similar to some other GM models. We've got some trim around the perimeter and some wipers that need to go before all that fun can happen.
Removing these old wipers can be a little bit tricky. GM had a few different designs, so it's good to take a quick glance and it might save you a little bit of hassle. Oftentimes there's a small clip that needs to be unlatched. If you lift the arm off the window, this little tab can be slid out. Sometimes you may have to use a flat tip screwdriver or a pick to lift this tab up. Then with a little pressure from a pry tool on the end of the arm where it attaches to the pivot point, a little bit of wiggle action and it'll usually pop right off. And if possible, I like to use a plastic pry bar because it's a little more forgiving on chrome and painted surfaces.
Now it's time to work on the trim. With this setup, we've got a big wide piece here at the base of it for those hidden wipers, and it's held in place with a couple of screws. For any of you guys who've worked on a setup like this, you know that there's one of them that always seems to just give you a fit. If you have one of these, take a hammer and hit the handle of your screwdriver. This does a couple of things. One, it sets the tip of the screwdriver in the head of the screw. Also, it shocks the threads, which in turn helps to loosen things up.
Next up for removal is our top and our side windshield trim. And these are held in place with a little clip that have to be pried up with a specialty tool. What you want to do is slide the hook end up underneath the trim on top of the glass. Use the hook to find the clip, and once it's set, rotate your wrist to pry the clip off the trim to free it up. A little wiggling and pulling and the piece should pop off. Now you just gotta do that with the rest of the clips on the trim piece. Once it's all out of the way, time to tackle the glass itself.
There's several ways to go about this, and there's several different tools. And some of these are a bit more forgiving than others. To choose the correct one for your application, well, you need to know a main factor, and that is what's holding it in place. Is it the old school soft butyl, or does it have a tougher urethane? Another thing that you need to consider, are you trying to save that piece that you're removing? If not, you can flog it just about as hard as you want to. But if you are trying to save it, well, I'm gonna recommend to you not to use anything air operated, because this thing can get pretty aggressive. With our old Chevy, it's got that old soft stuff, so it shouldn't be a big deal to get that thing out. What we're gonna do to get this task done is use some windshield cutout wire, what some people refer to as piano wire. Thank you, sir. Now what we're gonna do is take this and kind of push it up under the edge of the glass and then saw it out old school wise, kind of like them two-man saws. Now it isn't really required to be a two-man operation, but doing it this way lets each person pay attention to each side you're cutting. Now what we're gonna do is Joel's gonna pull that through there, and then I'm gonna hand him a bolt. I'm gonna use a bolt on my side, and we'll actually wrap this around there, and then we can pull it back and forth. I wouldn't recommend just taking this wire and wrap it around your fingers, because when you go to pulling on this, you're probably gonna cut yourself. For our side, I can choke it down this way, and you wanna pull it in the direction whichever way we're cutting. I'm gonna try to lay it around this glass corner. All right, pull it to you. We'll just go a little saw, a little saw. All right, let me come back. Makes some cool noises, don't it?
There it is.
Well, we need to get a stand to sit that dude on. Well, we've had a pretty good day, and old Fat Stack is spread out all across the floor.
You know, it's kind of funny, with this car put together, it was already taking up quite a bit of space, and now that it's disassembled, I'm taking up the whole shop.
Now, Fat Stack, we've got some big plans for it. It's gonna get big power and make a huge statement, but that's all to come. And I'm whooped for the day.
Yeah, you're not a spring chicken anymore.
That's not very nice.